The vultures had already started circling when Ryder Kane spotted the dark shape sprawled across the sand, half hidden behind a cluster of prickly pear cacti about 200 yards off the main trail. At first, he thought it was a downed horse or maybe a dead coyote, but something about the shape made him pull on the reins of his chestnut mare and squint against the harsh Arizona sun beating down on the desert between Wickenburg and Phoenix. It was late August of 1882, and the heat was merciless, shimmering up from the ground in waves that made everything look like it was underwater. He had been riding since dawn, carrying supplies from town to a small ranch 30 miles south, and his shirt was already soaked through with sweat despite the early hour. As he urged his horse closer, his stomach dropped. It was a person. A woman, from the looks of it, lying motionless on her side with one arm stretched out toward the trail as if she had been trying to crawl toward help before collapsing. Her dress was torn and covered in dust, her dark hair matted against her face. Ryder swung down from his saddle before his mare even came to a complete stop, his boots hitting the sand with a soft thud. He ran to her side, dropping to his knees and reaching for her wrist to check for a pulse. Her skin was hot to the touch, burning with sun exposure and fever, but there it was, a faint, thready beat against his fingertips. "Hey," he said, his voice rough from the dry air. "Can you hear me?" She did not respond. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her face flushed red beneath the layer of dust. Ryder looked around quickly, scanning the desert for any sign of what might have happened. There was no horse, no wagon, no indication of how she had ended up out here alone. The nearest town was Wickenburg, nearly 15 miles back the way he had come. No one could survive long out here on foot without water, especially not in this heat. He ran back to his horse and grabbed his canteen, returning to kneel beside her. Carefully, he lifted her head and shoulders, supporting her against his chest as he brought the canteen to her lips. "Come on now," he murmured. "Just a little bit. You need to drink." He let a small trickle of water flow between her lips, watching as some of it ran down her chin, but some of it, thank God, seemed to make it into her mouth. She made a small sound, almost like a whimper, and her eyelids fluttered. Encouraged, Ryder gave her a bit more water, not too much at once, remembering what his father had taught him about treating someone suffering from severe dehydration. "That's it," he said softly, slow and steady. After a few more sips, her eyes opened. They were a striking hazel, green and gold mixed together, and they stared up at him with confusion and fear. She tried to pull away from him, her movements weak and uncoordinated. "Easy," Ryder said, keeping his voice gentle. "You are safe. I am not going to hurt you. I found you out here in the desert. Do you remember what happened?" She stared at him for a long moment, her breathing shallow and rapid. Then her eyes welled up with tears, and she made a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. She started, but her voice was barely a whisper, raw and painful sounding. She winced and touched her throat. "Do not try to talk just yet," Ryder said. "Have some more water first." He gave her another careful drink, and she took it more eagerly this time, her hands coming up to grasp at the canteen. He let her hold it but kept his own hands there too, making sure she did not drink too fast and make herself sick. When she had drunk her fill, she pulled back and looked at him again. This time there was less fear in her eyes and more exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered. "Can you tell me your name?" Ryder asked. "Olivia," she said. "Olivia Owens." "Well, Miss Owens, I am Ryder Kane. Can you tell me what happened to you? How did you end up out here?" Her face crumpled, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, leaving clean tracks through the dust. "Bandits," she said. "They attacked our wagon yesterday morning. My father, he tried to fight them off, but there were too many. They shot him and took everything. The horses, the wagon, all of our belongings. I ran. I just ran and kept running until I could not hear the gunshots anymore, and then I got turned around. I could not find the trail again. I walked all day and all night, but everything looked the same, and I ran out of water and I thought I was going to die out here. Ryder felt a surge of anger on her behalf. Bandits had been a growing problem in this part of Arizona, preying on travelers and settlers moving through the territory. "Your father," he said gently. "Did you see what happened to him after they shot him?" She nodded, squeezing her eyes shut. "He fell. He was not moving. They just left him there and rode off with everything. I wanted to go back to him, but I was so scared. I am a coward. I just ran away and left him there." "You are not a coward," Ryder said firmly. "You survived. That took courage, and going back would not have helped him or you. It would have just gotten you killed too." She opened her eyes and looked at him with such raw pain that it made his chest ache. "He was all I had left. My mother died 3 years ago back in Missouri. It was just the two of us. We were traveling to California to start over, to find work. Now he is gone and I have nothing. No family, no money, nothing." Ryder sat back on his heels, thinking. He could not just leave her out here, but he also had a job to do, supplies to deliver to the Hendricks ranch. Then again, the Hendricks family would understand. This was a matter of life and death. "Can you ride?" he asked. Yes, I think so," Olivia said. "Good. I am going to take you back to Wickenburg. You need a doctor to look at you, and we need to report what happened to the sheriff. He will need to know about your father and the bandits." "Do you think you could find the place where it happened again?" She shook her head. "I do not know. Maybe. It was somewhere northeast of the trail, I think, but I was so confused and everything looks the same out here." Ryder nodded. "We will figure it out. First, let us get you somewhere safe." He stood and offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her carefully to her feet. She swayed, and he quickly put an arm around her waist to steady her. She was thin, he noticed, too thin, like she and her father had not been eating well even before the attack. "Can you walk?" "I will try," she said. He kept his arm around her as they made their way slowly to where his horse waited, patient and unbothered by the delay. The mare, whose name was Rosie, turned her head to watch them approach with liquid brown eyes. Ryder helped Olivia into the saddle first, then swung up behind her, settling her in front of him so he could keep an arm around her to make sure she did not fall. She leaned back against his chest, her body trembling with exhaustion. "Hold on," he said, and he turned Rosie back toward the north, back toward Wickenburg. The ride took several hours, even though Ryder pushed Rosie harder than he normally would have. Olivia dozed against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and he found himself acutely aware of her presence, of the way she felt in his arms. He was 26 years old and had never been much for romance. His life had been consumed by work, by trying to make a living in this harsh territory. His father had died 2 years ago, leaving Ryder the small freight business they had built together, hauling goods between towns and ranches across central Arizona. It was honest work, hard work, and it kept him too busy to think much about settling down or finding a wife. But there was something about Olivia Owens that stirred something in him. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him when she first opened her eyes, vulnerable and afraid but also hopeful. Maybe it was the courage she had shown, surviving alone in the desert. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that she needed help, and he was not the kind of man who could turn away from someone in need. By the time they reached Wickenburg, the sun was high in the sky and the heat was at its worst. The town was small but growing, with a main street lined with businesses and houses spreading out from there. Ryder guided Rosie straight to Doc Garrett's place, a small house on the eastern edge of town with a painted sign out front advertising medical services. He dismounted and carefully lifted Olivia down, surprised by how light she was. Her eyes were open again, but she looked dazed. "We are here," he told her. "The doctor will take care of you now." He carried her up the steps and kicked at the door with his boot since his hands were full. A moment later, it swung open to reveal Doc Garrett himself, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a kind face. His expression shifted from mild annoyance at the rough knock to concern when he saw Olivia in Ryder's arms. "What happened?" he asked, stepping back to let them in. "Found her in the desert," Ryder said. "She was attacked by bandits. No serious injuries that I can see, but she is suffering from exposure and dehydration." "Bring her back here," Doc Garrett said, leading them to a small examination room in the back of the house. There was a narrow bed covered in clean white sheets, and Ryder laid Olivia down gently. The doctor immediately began his examination, checking her pulse and her breathing, looking at her eyes and her sun-burned skin. "You did the right thing bringing her in," Doc Garrett said to Ryder. "Another few hours out there and she would not have made it. You go on and let me work. Come back in an hour or so and we will talk." Ryder hesitated, looking down at Olivia. Her eyes found his and she reached out, her fingers catching his wrist. "Please do not leave me," she whispered. Something in his chest twisted. He looked at Doc Garrett, who raised an eyebrow but nodded. "You can stay if it makes her more comfortable," the doctor said. "Just stay out of my way." Ryder pulled a chair over to the side of the bed and sat down, taking Olivia's hand in his. "I am right here," he told her. "You are safe now." Doc Garrett worked efficiently, cleaning the cuts on Olivia's feet and hands, applying salve to her sunburned skin, and giving her more water mixed with a bit of salt and sugar to help her body recover. Throughout it all, Ryder stayed by her side, holding her hand and offering quiet reassurance when she winced at the doctor's ministrations. Finally, Doc Garrett stepped back and wiped his hands on a clean cloth. "She will be all right," he said. "She needs rest, plenty of fluids and food. Small amounts at first, nothing too heavy. Her feet are torn up pretty bad from walking without proper shoes, so she should stay off them for a few days. Where will she be staying?" That was a good question. Ryder looked at Olivia, who was staring up at the ceiling with a blank expression. She had no family, no money, nowhere to go. "I will figure something out," he said. Doc Garrett gave him a knowing look. "Mrs. Patterson runs a boarding house over on 2nd Street. She is a good woman, charges fair rates. I am sure she would be willing to help given the circumstances." "Thank you, Doc," Ryder said. "What do I owe you?" "Let us call it $5, Doc Garrett said. Ryder paid him from the money he carried for his freight business, making a mental note to account for it later. The doctor left them alone and Ryder turned back to Olivia. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired," she said, "and scared. I keep thinking about my father, about what they did to him. He deserved better. He was a good man." "I am sorry," Ryder said, and he meant it. "I know it does not help much, but I am truly sorry for your loss." She turned her head to look at him, tears sliding down her temples into her hair. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not even know me." "Does a man need a reason to help someone in need?" Ryder asked. "Most men do," she said quietly. "Most men would have ridden past or, worse, taken advantage of the situation." Ryder felt another flash of anger, not at her but at the world that had taught her to expect the worst from people. "Well, I am not most men," he said. "And I am not going to let anything else bad happen to you if I can help it. Now, the doctor says you need rest, and you cannot walk on those feet for a few days. I am going to take you over to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. She will give you a room and look after you. I will pay for it." "You cannot do that," Olivia protested weakly. "You have already done so much." "I can and I will," Ryder said. "We can argue about it later when you are feeling stronger. For now, just let me help you." She looked like she wanted to argue more, but exhaustion won out. She nodded and closed her eyes. "Thank you, Ryder," she whispered. He felt a warmth spread through his chest at the sound of his name on her lips. He had known her for only a few hours, but already he felt a connection to her, a sense of protectiveness and something else, something he was not quite ready to name yet. After giving her a bit more time to rest, Ryder carried her out to Rosie again and rode slowly to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. The proprietor was indeed a kind woman, matronly and efficient, and she clucked over Olivia like a mother hen when Ryder explained the situation. She showed them to a small but clean room on the second floor and helped Ryder get Olivia settled into the bed. "I will bring her some broth and bread," Mrs. Patterson said. "Poor dear looks half-starved. You did a good thing, Mr. Kane, bringing her in." "Thank you, madam," Ryder said. He turned to Olivia, who was already looking more comfortable in the soft bed with clean sheets. "I need to go report this to the sheriff and then take care of some business. I will come back to check on you later, all right?" "All right," Olivia said. She caught his hand again, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for everything. You saved my life." "You are welcome," Ryder said, squeezing back. Then, reluctantly, he let go and left the room. His next stop was the sheriff's office, where he found Sheriff Tom Morrison sitting behind his desk, working through a stack of paperwork. Morrison was a solid, no-nonsense lawman in his 40s who had been keeping the peace in Wickenburg for the better part of a decade. He looked up when Ryder walked in, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Ryder Kane," he said. "What brings you in today? Got trouble?" "Not for me, but I found someone who does," Ryder said, and he proceeded to tell the sheriff everything Olivia had told him about the bandit attack. Morrison's expression grew grim. "That is the third attack this month," he said. "These bastards are getting bolder." "Did she give you any description of them? How many there were?" "She said there were too many for her father to fight off, but she did not give me a specific number. She was too scared and confused to remember many details. She thinks it happened somewhere northeast of the main trail between here and Phoenix, but she got turned around and lost after she ran." "I will get a posse together and head out at first light tomorrow," Morrison said. "Maybe we can find where it happened, recover her father's body at least, and give him a proper burial. And maybe, if we are lucky, we will pick up the bandits' trail." "I would like to ride with you," Ryder said. Morrison looked at him thoughtfully. "You are welcome to, but what about your freight business? I thought you had deliveries to make." "This is more important," Ryder said. "Besides, the Hendricks family will understand. I will ride out there later today and explain the situation." "Fair enough," Morrison said. "Be here at dawn. And bring plenty of water and ammunition. We might be out there for a few days." Ryder agreed and left the sheriff's office. He spent the rest of the afternoon riding out to the Hendricks ranch, delivering what supplies he could spare from his load and explaining why he could not complete the full delivery right now. As he had predicted, the family was understanding, and Mr. Hendricks even offered to send a couple of his ranch hands along with the posse to help track the bandits. By the time Ryder made it back to Wickenburg, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He stabled Rosie at the livery, making sure she was well fed and watered after the long day, then made his way back to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. Mrs. Patterson met him at the door. "She is sleeping," the older woman said quietly. "Poor thing ate a bit of broth and half a slice of bread, then fell right asleep. I checked on her a few minutes ago and she seems to be resting peacefully." "That is good," Ryder said. "I am glad she is getting some rest. She has been through hell." "She certainly has," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "Will you be staying in town tonight, Mr. Kane? I have another room available if you need it." Ryder had not planned on it, but the idea of being nearby in case Olivia needed anything was appealing. "Yes, madam, I think I will, thank you." She showed him to a room just down the hall from Olivia's, and Ryder paid her for both rooms for the next few days. Then he went out to get himself some dinner at the small restaurant on Main Street, eating quickly and without much attention to the food. His mind was on Olivia, on the attack she had survived, on the loss of her father. He could not imagine what she must be feeling right now, the grief and fear and uncertainty about the future. When he returned to the boarding house, he paused outside Olivia's door, listening. He could hear nothing from inside, which he hoped meant she was still sleeping. He went to his own room and tried to get some rest, knowing he had a long day ahead of him tomorrow. But sleep was elusive. He kept thinking about the way Olivia had looked when he first found her, alone and dying in the desert. He kept thinking about the way her hand had felt in his, small and fragile but also strong in its own way. He finally fell asleep sometime after midnight, and when he woke before dawn, he felt gritty-eyed and unrested. But there was work to be done. He washed up and dressed, then checked on Olivia before heading out. He opened her door quietly and looked in to find her still asleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her face peaceful. She looked very young in sleep, vulnerable, and he felt that protective surge again. He left the boarding house and headed to the sheriff's office, where Morrison and a group of about 8 men were already gathering. There were a couple of deputies, the 2 ranch hands Mr. Hendricks had sent, and a few other townsmen who volunteered to help. They set out just as the sun was rising, riding northeast from town toward the area where Olivia thought the attack had happened. The search took most of the day. The desert was vast and featureless in many places, and without more specific directions, they were essentially searching blind. But late in the afternoon, one of the ranch hands found wagon tracks and signs of a struggle. They followed the tracks and soon came upon a grim scene. A broken wagon, its contents scattered and looted, and the body of a middle-aged man lying in the sand nearby. Ryder dismounted and approached the body, his stomach churning. The man had been shot multiple times, and scavengers had already been at work, but it was clearly the remains of Olivia's father. He forced himself to look away and focus on the task at hand. While some of the men examined the scene and tried to pick up the bandits' trail, Ryder and a couple of others wrapped the body in a blanket and secured it to one of the pack horses they had brought along. Sheriff Morrison came over, his face grim. "The trail heads west from here, toward the mountains. Looks like there were 6 or 7 of them from the tracks. But the trail is already a couple of days old and they have a good head start. We can try to follow, but the chances of catching up to them are slim." "We should try anyway," one of the deputies said. Morrison nodded. "We will follow it as far as we can, but we are also bringing Mr. Owens back to town for a proper burial. Ryder, would you be willing to ride back with him? I know Miss Owens will want to lay her father to rest." Ryder agreed, though part of him wanted to continue with the hunt for the bandits. But Morrison was right. Olivia needed this, needed to be able to say goodbye to her father. He and one of the ranch hands turned back toward Wickenburg, leading the horse that carried the body. They arrived back in town well after dark. Ryder took the body to the undertaker, a Sommer man named Mr. Finch, and arranged for him to prepare it for burial. Then, exhausted and emotionally drained, he made his way back to the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson was waiting for him in the parlor. "Miss Owens has been asking about you," she said. "She is awake and in her room. I think she would like to see you." Ryder climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of what he had to tell her. He knocked softly on her door and her voice called out, "Come in." He entered to find her sitting up in bed, looking much better than she had that morning. Her color was improved and there was more life in her eyes. But when she saw his expression, her face fell. "You found him," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Ryder said quietly. He crossed the room and sat down in the chair beside her bed. "I am so sorry, Olivia. We brought him back. The undertaker is preparing him now. We can arrange a burial for tomorrow or the next day, whenever you are ready." She was silent for a long moment, staring down at her hands. Then she took a shaky breath. Was it very bad?" "He did not suffer long," Ryder said, which was not exactly an answer but was the kindest thing he could say. "And we will make sure he gets a proper Christian burial. The preacher in town, Reverend Matthews, is a good man. He will say the words over your father and see him laid to rest in the cemetery." Olivia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He wanted to make it to California so badly," she whispered. "He had such plans, such hopes, and now he will never see it." Ryder did not know what to say to that, so he just reached out and took her hand, holding it gently. She gripped his hand tightly as if it were a lifeline and cried quietly for a long time. He stayed with her, offering what comfort he could with his presence. Finally, her tears subsided and she wiped at her face with her free hand. "I am sorry," she said. "I am being foolish." "You are not being foolish," Ryder said firmly. "You are grieving. That is natural and right. Do not apologize for it." She looked at him, her hazel eyes red-rimmed but grateful. "You are a good man, Ryder Kane. I do not know what I would have done without you." "You would have survived," Ryder said. "You are stronger than you think." "I do not feel very strong right now," she admitted. "Strength is not about never feeling weak," Ryder said. "It is about keeping going even when you do feel weak, and you have done that. You are still here, still fighting. That is strength." She gave him a watery smile. "When did you become so wise?" "My father used to say things like that," Ryder said. "I guess some of it stuck." "Your father sounds like he was a good man too," Olivia said. "He was," Ryder agreed. "He died a couple of years ago. Heart gave out on him. I miss him every day, but it gets easier with time. The pain does not go away exactly, but it becomes something you can carry." Olivia nodded slowly. "I hope you are right." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, and then Mrs. Patterson knocked on the door to bring Olivia some dinner. Ryder excused himself to let her eat and get some rest, promising to come back in the morning to help her with the funeral arrangements. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Olivia was still too weak to walk much, so Ryder took care of most of the arrangements, working with Reverend Matthews and Mr. Finch the undertaker to prepare for the burial. The funeral was held on a bright, hot morning at the small cemetery on the edge of town. A handful of townspeople came to pay their respects, including Doc Garrett, Mrs. Patterson, and Sheriff Morrison, who had returned from the hunt for the bandits empty-handed. Olivia stood beside the grave, leaning heavily on Ryder's arm for support. She wore a simple black dress that Mrs. Patterson had found for her, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked pale and drawn, but she held herself with dignity as Reverend Matthews read from the Bible and said a few words about the hope of resurrection and eternal life. When it was over and the grave was filled in, Olivia stood there for a long moment, staring down at the fresh-turned earth. "Goodbye, Papa," she whispered. "I love you. I am sorry I could not save you." Ryder put his arm around her shoulders, offering silent support. Finally, she turned away from the grave, and he helped her back to the wagon he had borrowed to bring her to the cemetery. As they rode back to the boarding house, she was quiet, lost in her own thoughts. Over the next few days, Olivia slowly regained her strength. Her feet healed enough for her to walk short distances, and her color improved with regular meals and rest. But Ryder could see the sadness in her eyes, the way she seemed to be just going through the motions of living. She spent most of her time in her room at the boarding house, and when Ryder came to visit her, which he did every day, she was polite but distant. He understood that she was grieving, but he also worried about her. She had no family, no money, and no clear path forward. One evening about a week after the funeral, he decided to broach the subject with her. He found her sitting in the small parlor of the boarding house, staring out the window at the sunset. "May I join you?" he asked. She looked up and managed a small smile. "Of course." He sat down across from her, trying to figure out how to start this conversation. "Olivia," he said finally, "I have been thinking about your situation, about what happens next for you. Have you given any thought to it?" Her smile faded. "I have thought about little else," she said quietly. "But I do not have many options. I have no money, no skills that would help me find work. I suppose I could try to find a position as a housekeeper or a cook somewhere, but even that requires references, people who can vouch for me. I have no one." "You have me," Ryder said, and the words were out before he could think about them too much. "I mean, I can vouch for you, and I have been thinking I could use some help with my business. I spend most of my time on the road, hauling freight between towns and ranches. It is lonely work, and it would be useful to have someone to help keep the books, manage supplies, that sort of thing. I cannot pay much to start, but I could offer room and board and a small wage. It would give you a chance to get back on your feet." Olivia stared at him, her eyes wide. You want me to work for you?" "Yes," Ryder said. "Unless you have a better offer or would rather do something else. I understand if you do not want to. I just thought, well, it seemed like it might be a solution that would help both of us." "Why are you doing this?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you being so kind to me? You have already done so much. You saved my life, paid for my room and board, arranged my father's funeral, and now you are offering me a job. Why?" Ryder met her gaze, and he realized he did not have a simple answer to that question. The truth was complicated, tangled up with his growing feelings for her, feelings he was not sure she was ready to hear about. "Because you needed help and I could give it," he said finally. "Because I think you deserve a chance to build a new life after everything you have lost. And because, honestly, I enjoy your company. I like talking to you. I like being around you. Is that a good enough reason?" Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different from the grief tears he had seen before. These seemed to be tears of relief, of gratitude. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking. "Yes, that is a good enough reason. And yes, I accept your offer. I will work for you. I will work hard, I promise. I will earn my keep." "I have no doubt about that," Ryder said, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "We will work out the details, but I think this could be good for both of us." She wiped at her eyes and gave him a smile. A real smile this time, the first genuine one he had seen from her since the attack. "Thank you, Ryder. You have given me more than just a job. You have given me hope. You have given me a reason to keep going." Ryder felt his heart skip a beat at her words. He reached across the space between them and took her hand, and she did not pull away. "You would have found a reason on your own eventually," he said, "but I am glad I could help." They sat together as the sun set outside, hands clasped, and Ryder felt something shift between them, something tentative but real. It was the beginning of something, he thought. Something that could grow into something more if they let it. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new routine. Olivia moved out of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house and into a small house on the outskirts of Wickenburg that Ryder rented. It was a modest place, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was clean and sturdy, with a small barn out back for Rosie and the wagon Ryder used for his freight business. Olivia took over one of the rooms, and Ryder slept in the other. maintaining a respectful distance even as they spent more and more time together. True to her word, Olivia threw herself into the work. She had a quick mind and a head for numbers, and she soon had Ryder's chaotic record keeping organized and streamlined. She helped him plan routes, manage inventory, and even negotiate prices with some of the merchants and ranchers they worked with. Ryder found that having her around made the work easier and more enjoyable. They would sit together in the evenings, going over the books or planning the next day's route, and they would talk about everything and nothing, sharing stories about their lives. Ryder learned that Olivia had been a schoolteacher back in Missouri before her mother died and her father decided to move west. She loved books and learning, and she had a wry sense of humor that came out more and more as she healed from her trauma. She learned that Ryder had grown up in Arizona Territory, the son of a freight hauler and a seamstress who had died when he was young. He had been working alongside his father since he was a boy, learning the business from the ground up. As the weeks turned into months, Ryder found himself falling for Olivia. It was not a sudden thing, not a lightning strike, but a slow, steady deepening of affection and respect. He loved the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating on the ledgers, the way she always made sure he ate a proper breakfast before heading out on a long haul. He loved her strength, the way she had taken the tragedy that had befallen her and turned it into a determination to build a new life. But he was not sure how she felt about him. She was friendly and warm, and there were moments when he caught her looking at him with something in her eyes that made his heart race. But he did not want to push her, did not want to make her uncomfortable or jeopardize the good thing they had going. So he kept his feelings to himself and tried to be content with her friendship. Then, one evening in early November, everything changed. They had just finished a particularly long haul to a ranch north of Wickenburg, and they were both tired and dusty as they drove the wagon back toward home. The sun was setting, and the air was finally cooling down after the heat of the day. Olivia was sitting beside him on the wagon seat, and she had been unusually quiet for the last hour. "Are you all right?" Ryder asked, glancing over at her. She was silent for a moment, then she said, "Can we stop for a minute? There is something I want to talk to you about." Ryder felt a flutter of nerves in his stomach, but he pulled the wagon to a halt and set the brake. "Of course. What is on your mind?" Olivia turned to face him, and in the golden light of the sunset, she looked beautiful. "I have been thinking," she said slowly, "about everything that has happened over the past few months, about how you found me in the desert and saved my life, about how you have given me a home and a job and a reason to keep going when I had lost everything. And I have been thinking about you, about the kind of man you are." Ryder's heart was pounding now. "Olivia, please, let me finish," she said, and he fell silent. "You are kind and generous and patient. You have never asked for anything in return for all you have done for me. You have never made me feel like I owe you anything. And over these past months, I've come to care for you, more than I thought I would. More than I think is appropriate for an employee to care about her employer." Ryder felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you are not just an employee to me. You have not been for a long time. I care about you too. I think I am falling in love with you." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she just stared at him. Then, to his surprise and delight, she smiled. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she said softly. Ryder reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing gently over her cheeks. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not pull away. When his lips met hers, it was like coming home. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of all the things he had been feeling but had not known how to say. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Ryder admitted. "I have wanted you to," Olivia said, and then she laughed, a sound of pure joy that made his heart soar. They sat there together on the wagon seat, holding each other as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to come out. Ryder felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. He had found her in the desert, alone and dying, and he had given her water and a reason to keep going. But in saving her, he had found something too. He had found love, real and true, and the promise of a future he had not even known he wanted. Over the next few months, their relationship deepened. They were courting now, officially, and the whole town of Wickenburg seemed to approve. Mrs. Patterson made knowing comments every time she saw them together. Doc Garrett gave Ryder a slap on the back and told him he had found himself a fine woman. Even Sheriff Morrison, a gruff man not given to sentiment, offered his congratulations. Ryder and Olivia continued to work together, running the freight business and building it into something more successful than it had been when it was just Ryder on his own. Olivia's organizational skills and business sense helped them secure contracts with larger ranches and merchants, and they were able to hire a couple of young men to help with some of the longer hauls. But it was not all work. Ryder made sure they took time to enjoy each other's company, to go for walks in the cooler evenings, to attend the occasional social event in town. He courted her properly, with flowers and small gifts, with compliments and careful attention to what made her happy. And Olivia blossomed under his care, her grief slowly giving way to a genuine happiness that lit up her face and made her even more beautiful in his eyes. By the spring of 1883, Ryder knew he wanted to marry her. He had known it for months, really, but he wanted to be sure she was ready. One evening in late April, after a particularly successful week of deliveries, he asked her to take a walk with him. They strolled out beyond the edge of town, to a spot where they could see the desert stretching out under the stars. "Olivia," he said, taking her hand, "I have something I want to ask you." She looked up at him, her eyes curious. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, suddenly more nervous than he had ever been in his life. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you since. Well, I am not sure exactly when it started, but I know I love you now. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a future with you, to grow old with you. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Olivia just stared at him, and Ryder's heart sank. Had he misread the situation? Had he moved too fast? But then her face broke into the biggest smile he had ever seen, and she threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she said, her voice full of joy. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I love you too, Ryder. I want to marry you." He kissed her then, a kiss full of passion and promise, and when they pulled apart, they were both laughing. "I do not have a ring yet," he admitted. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you would say yes before I spent the money." "I do not need a ring," Olivia said. "I just need you." "You will get a ring anyway," Ryder said. "I will go to Phoenix next week and buy you the nicest one I can afford." They were married in June, in a simple ceremony at the church in Wickenburg with Reverend Matthews officiating. The whole town turned out for the wedding, and Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears and insisted on hosting a small reception at her boarding house afterward. Olivia wore a dress that she had sewn herself, a beautiful creation in white with delicate lace trim, and Ryder wore his best suit, which he had bought specially for the occasion. As they stood together in front of the Reverend, exchanging vows and rings, Ryder felt a sense of completeness he had never known before. This was what he had been missing, what he had been searching for without even knowing it. Olivia was his partner, his love, his reason for everything. After the wedding, they moved into a larger house, still on the outskirts of Wickenburg but with more room to grow. They continued to run the freight business together, and it thrived under their joint management. But they also made time for their personal life, for building a home and a marriage. Their first year of marriage was full of joy and discovery. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's quirks and habits. They had their first fight, a silly argument about how to organize the storage shed that ended with both of them laughing at themselves. They weathered their first real challenge together when a late summer storm damaged part of their barn, and they had to work together to repair it. Through it all, their love grew stronger. Ryder marveled at how lucky he had been to find Olivia, to have been in the right place at the right time to save her life. And Olivia often told him that he had not just saved her life that day in the desert. He had given her a reason to want to live, a reason to believe in the possibility of happiness again. In the spring of 1884, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Ryder one evening after dinner, her eyes shining with excitement and a little bit of fear. "I am going to have a baby," she said. "We are going to have a baby." Ryder felt a rush of emotion so strong he could hardly speak. Joy, fear, excitement, protectiveness, all swirling together. He pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. "A baby," he said, his voice thick. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Olivia asked, pulling back to look at him. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Ryder said. "I am thrilled. I am terrified. I do not even have words for what I am feeling right now. But yes, I am happy. So happy." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and as she grew larger, she found the Arizona heat increasingly unbearable. But she bore it all with grace and humor, and Ryder did everything he could to make her comfortable. He took on more of the physical work of the business, hiring additional help so Olivia could rest. He brought her cool drinks and rubbed her swollen feet in the evenings. He read to her from the books she loved when she was too tired to read herself. In late November of 1884, on a cool night with a sky full of stars, Olivia went into labor. Doc Garrett and Mrs. Patterson were both there to help, and Ryder paced the floor of their small house, feeling utterly useless and more frightened than he had ever been. The hours dragged on, and he heard Olivia cry out in pain more than once, and each time it felt like a knife to his heart. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, he heard a different sound, the thin, high wail of a newborn baby. His heart leapt, and a moment later Mrs. Patterson came out with a smile on her face. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, beautiful boy, and your wife is doing well too. You can go in and see them." Ryder walked into the bedroom on shaky legs. Olivia was lying in the bed, looking exhausted but radiant, and in her arms was a tiny, squirming bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face, and she smiled. "Come meet your son," she said. Ryder crossed the room and sat down carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the baby. He was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny, perfect fingers that waved in the air. "He is beautiful," Ryder whispered. "He is perfect." "We did good," Olivia said, her voice tired but happy. "You did all the hard work," Ryder said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I am so proud of you, and I love you so much." "I love you too," Olivia said. She looked down at the baby. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names, but now that the baby was here, Ryder found himself thinking of his father. "What about Robert?" he suggested. "After my father, Robert Kane." Olivia smiled. "Robert Kane, I like it. Welcome to the world, Robert." Little Robert was a good baby, all things considered. He was healthy and grew quickly, and both Ryder and Olivia doted on him. Ryder found that fatherhood came naturally to him, and he loved holding his son, watching him sleep, seeing the way his tiny face would scrunch up when he was hungry or tired. Olivia was a natural mother, patient and loving, and she seemed to glow with happiness. As Robert grew from a baby into a toddler, the freight business continued to thrive. Ryder and Olivia hired more help and expanded their operations, taking on more routes and larger contracts. They were able to save money and invest in improvements to their property, adding on to the house and building a proper stable for their growing number of horses. But for all their success, what mattered most to both of them was their family. They made sure to always have dinner together in the evenings, to spend time playing with Robert, to maintain the connection and love that had brought them together. Ryder often thought back to that day in the desert, to the moment when he had found Olivia half dead and alone. He thought about how easily he could have missed her, could have ridden past without seeing her. And he was grateful every single day that he had been there, that he had been able to help her, to save her, and in doing so to find the love of his life. In the fall of 1886, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in May of 1887 she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose after Ryder's faithful horse Rosie, who had carried them both to safety that first day. Rose was a beautiful baby with her mother's hazel eyes and her father's dark hair, and Robert, now 2.5, was fascinated by his new little sister. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The business continued to do well, providing them with a good living and allowing them to build a secure future for their children. Wickenburg grew and changed around them, becoming more established as the territory developed. Ryder and Olivia became respected members of the community, known for their hard work, their honesty, and their generosity to those in need. As the years passed, Ryder and Olivia's love only deepened. They had the kind of partnership that came from truly knowing each other, from having weathered storms together and come out stronger on the other side. They still worked together in the business, though they had enough employees now that they did not have to do all the hauling themselves. They spent their evenings with their children, teaching them, playing with them, watching them grow. Robert proved to be a bright, curious boy, always asking questions and wanting to help his father with the horses and the wagons. Rose was more quiet, more thoughtful, with a love of books that she inherited from her mother. Olivia taught both children to read and write, and she told them stories about their grandfather Owens, the man they had never met but whose memory she kept alive for them. In the summer of 1890, when Robert was 5 and Rose was 3, the family took a trip to Phoenix. It was partly for business, to meet with some potential new clients, but also just for the adventure of it, to show the children more of the territory. They stayed in a hotel, a real treat, and walked the streets of the growing city, marveling at the changes that were happening as Arizona moved toward eventual statehood. One evening, as they were walking back to the hotel after dinner, Robert asked, "Papa, how did you and Mama meet?" Ryder and Olivia exchanged a glance, and Olivia smiled. "That is quite a story," she said. "Should we tell them?" "I think they are old enough to hear at least part of it," Ryder said. He scooped Rose up into his arms and began to tell the story, with Olivia filling in details here and there. He told them about finding Olivia in the desert, about giving her water and bringing her to safety. He told them about how they had become friends and then more than friends, and how they had fallen in love and gotten married. He left out the darker parts, the death of Olivia's father and the bandit attack. Those were stories for when the children were older and could understand them better. For now, it was enough to tell them the story of how their parents had found each other and built a life together. "So Mama was lost and you found her?" Robert asked, his young face serious. "That is right," Ryder said. She was lost and in trouble, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time to help her. It was more than that, Olivia said softly, looking at Ryder with love in her eyes. Your father gave me hope when I had lost everything. He gave me a reason to keep going, to believe that life could be good again. He saved me in more ways than one. And your mother saved me too, Ryder added. She made my life better in every possible way. She gave me love and a family and a reason to be the best man I could be. Rose, who had been listening quietly from her perch in her father's arms, said, I am glad you found Mama, Papa. So am I, sweetheart, Ryder said, kissing the top of her head. So am I. That night, after the children were asleep in the hotel room, Ryder and Olivia stood together on the small balcony, looking out at the lights of Phoenix. Olivia leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you had not found me that day? Olivia asked. Sometimes, Ryder admitted, but I try not to think about it too much. It makes me sick to imagine a world where I rode past you, where you died out there in the desert. I do not want to think about what my life would have been without you. I think about it, Olivia said quietly. I think about how close I came to dying, to never experiencing any of this. This life we have built, our children, our love. I was so close to losing it all before I even knew it was possible. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying. You gave me everything, Ryder. You gave me everything too, Ryder said. He turned her in his arms so they were facing each other. I love you, Olivia. I have loved you since the beginning, and I will love you until the end. I love you too, she said, and she kissed him, a kiss full of the depth of feeling that had only grown stronger over the years. They stood there together under the stars, holding each other, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built something beautiful and lasting. And Ryder knew, with absolute certainty, that he would spend the rest of his life being grateful for that day in the desert, for the choice he had made to stop and help a stranger, for the love that had grown from that simple act of compassion. The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of their children's lives and the steady success of their business. In 1892, Olivia gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas. Robert and Rose welcomed their little brother with excitement, and the house was full of the noise and chaos of a growing family. Ryder expanded the business again, buying more wagons and horses and hiring more drivers. What had started as a one-man operation had grown into one of the most successful freight companies in central Arizona. But Ryder never forgot his roots, never forgot the hard work and determination it had taken to build it all. And he made sure that his employees were treated fairly and paid well, remembering what it had been like to struggle. Olivia, meanwhile, became increasingly involved in the community. She started a small school for the children of Wickenburg, teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic in a one-room schoolhouse that the town built with donated funds. She loved teaching, loved seeing the children learn and grow, and she was beloved by the families in the area. But no matter how busy they were, Ryder and Olivia always made time for each other and for their family. Sunday dinners were sacred, a time when they all gathered together to eat and talk and laugh. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, Ryder and Olivia would sit together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the desert and talking about their day. In 1895, when Robert was 10, Rose was 8, and Thomas was 3, tragedy struck the community. A particularly virulent strain of influenza swept through Wickenburg, affecting many families. Ryder and Olivia did what they could to help, bringing supplies to families who were quarantined, helping Doc Garrett care for the sick. They were fortunate that their own children remained healthy, though there were some tense days when Thomas developed a fever that turned out to be nothing more than a cold. The epidemic passed, but it left scars on the community. Several families lost loved ones, and the town came together to support those who were grieving. Olivia threw herself into helping however she could, organizing food deliveries and offering comfort to those who had lost family members. Ryder was proud of her compassion and her strength, and he loved her even more for the way she cared for others. By 1897, Robert was showing a real aptitude for the freight business. At 12 years old, he was already helping his father with some of the shorter hauls, learning how to handle the horses and manage the cargo. He was a responsible, hard-working boy, and Ryder saw a lot of himself in his son. Rose, meanwhile, was excelling in her studies and had expressed an interest in becoming a teacher like her mother. And Thomas, at 5, was a bundle of energy and mischief, always getting into something but with such a sweet nature that it was hard to stay mad at him. Ryder and Olivia watched their children grow with pride and a touch of melancholy, knowing that childhood was fleeting and that soon enough, their babies would be adults with lives of their own. But they treasured every moment, every dinner table conversation, every scraped knee and bedtime story and shared laugh. In the fall of 1898, Olivia's health began to decline. It started with fatigue, which she attributed to the demands of teaching and raising 3 active children. But as the weeks went on, she began to experience other symptoms: shortness of breath, a persistent cough, and a general sense of weakness. Ryder insisted she see Doc Garrett, who examined her thoroughly. The news was not good. The doctor diagnosed her with a chronic lung condition, likely caused by years of breathing in the dust and dry air of the desert. There was no cure, he said, but with rest and care, she could manage the symptoms and hopefully live for many more years. Ryder was devastated, but he did not let Olivia see his fear. Instead, he focused on taking care of her, making sure she rested and did not overexert herself. He hired additional help for the school so Olivia did not have to work as hard, and he took on even more of the household responsibilities. The children, sensing that something was wrong, became more helpful and less argumentative, doing their chores without being asked and spending quiet time with their mother. Olivia, for her part, bore her illness with the same grace she had shown in facing every other challenge in her life. She did not complain, did not wallow in self-pity. She simply adjusted to her new limitations and focused on enjoying the time she had with her family. And gradually, with careful management, her condition stabilized. She was not the same robust woman she had been, but she was able to continue teaching part-time and spending time with her children. The turn of the century came, bringing with it changes to Arizona territory. Talk of statehood was growing louder, and the territory was developing rapidly. Wickenburg was no longer the small frontier town it had been when Ryder and Olivia first met. It had electricity now, and a proper main street with brick buildings, and a growing population. Ryder and Olivia adapted to the changes, updating their business to take advantage of new opportunities. They began hauling different kinds of goods, including machinery and equipment for the mines that were springing up around the territory. The business continued to thrive, providing a comfortable living for the family and employment for a dozen men. In 1902, Robert turned 17. He had grown into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's intelligence and compassion. He had been working full-time in the freight business for the past year, and Ryder was increasingly relying on him to manage some of the operations. They began to talk about Robert taking over the business eventually, about building a legacy that could be passed down through the generations. Rose, at 15, had become a beautiful young woman with her mother's hazel eyes and a quiet confidence that made her stand out. She was still passionate about education and was helping her mother at the school, assisting with the younger children. And Thomas, at 10, was finally starting to settle down a bit, channeling his energy into helping at the stables and learning about the business from his father and brother. One evening in the spring of that year, Ryder and Olivia were sitting on their porch as they had done so many times over the years. The children were inside, and the desert was quiet except for the occasional call of a night bird. Olivia was wrapped in a shawl against the cool evening air, and Ryder had his arm around her. "You ever regret it?" Ryder asked suddenly. "Staying here, building a life in the desert instead of continuing on to California like you and your father had planned?" Olivia looked at him in surprise. "Regret it? How could I regret it? This is my home. You are my home. Our children, our life together, this is everything I ever wanted. I never made it to California, but I found something so much better here." "I am glad," Ryder said, "because I cannot imagine my life without you. I think about that day I found you in the desert, and I know it was the most important day of my life. Everything good that has happened to me since then has come from that moment, from the choice I made to stop and help you." "I think about that day too," Olivia said softly. "I was so lost, so hopeless. I had given up. I was ready to die. And then you appeared and you gave me water and you gave me hope. You gave me a reason to keep going, and look at what we have built from that. A family, a business, a whole life. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "You gave me just as much," Ryder said. "You gave me love and purpose and a reason to be better than I was. You made me want to be the kind of man who deserved you." "You always deserved me," Olivia said, reaching up to cup his face in her hand. "You are a good man, Ryder Kane. The best man I have ever known, and I love you more than I can ever express." "I love you too," Ryder said, and he kissed her, a kiss that held all the tenderness and passion of nearly 20 years of marriage. They sat together in comfortable silence after that, watching the stars come out one by one. And Ryder felt a deep sense of contentment, a knowledge that no matter what challenges the future might bring, they would face them together, as they had faced everything else. The years continued to pass. Robert married a sweet young woman named Sarah in 1905, and they gave Ryder and Olivia their first grandchild, a boy named James, in 1906. Rose followed her dreams and went to Teachers College in Phoenix, returning to Wickenburg in 1908 to take over the running of the school from her mother, whose health had declined to the point where she could no longer work regularly. Thomas, now in his late teens, had fully embraced the freight business and was working alongside his father and brother. The business had continued to grow, and in 1909, Ryder officially retired from the day-to-day operations, turning management over to Robert and Thomas. He stayed on as an advisor and still went out on the occasional haul when he felt like it, but for the most part, he was content to spend his time with Olivia. Her health had continued to be a concern. The lung condition had progressed slowly but steadily, and by 1910, she was largely confined to their home. Doc Garrett, now an old man himself, came by regularly to check on her and provide what treatment he could. But they all knew there was only so much that could be done. Ryder spent most of his time caring for her now. He read to her from the books she loved, helped her write letters to Rose in town and Robert and Sarah at their own home, and simply sat with her, holding her hand and reminiscing about their life together. The children and grandchildren visited often, filling the house with life and laughter. One evening in late summer of 1911, Olivia was having a particularly difficult time breathing. Ryder had sent for Doc Garrett and the whole family had gathered, sensing that this might be the end. The doctor gave her something for the pain and to help her breathe easier, and then he quietly left the room to give the family privacy. Olivia was lying in their bed, propped up on pillows, with Ryder sitting beside her holding her hand. Robert, Sarah, and little James were there, along with Rose and Thomas. Olivia looked at each of them in turn, her eyes still bright despite her labored breathing. "I love you all so much," she said, her voice weak but clear. "You have made my life so full, so rich. I could not have asked for better children or a better family." "We love you too, Mama," Rose said, tears streaming down her face. Olivia squeezed Ryder's hand and looked at him. "You saved me," she said. "All those years ago you saved me, and you have kept saving me every day since. You have given me a beautiful life, Ryder Kane. Thank you." "You saved me too," Ryder said, his own voice breaking. "You are my everything, Olivia. You always have been." She smiled at him, and for a moment she looked like the young woman he had found in the desert all those years ago. "I am not afraid," she said. "I know where I am going, and I know you will be all right. You have our children and grandchildren. You have so much love around you. Promise me you will keep living, keep finding joy." "I promise," Ryder said, even though the thought of life without her was unbearable. "I will love you forever," Olivia said. "In this life and the next." "I will love you forever too," Ryder said. She closed her eyes then, still smiling, and her breathing slowly became shallower and shallower. Ryder held her hand and watched her face, memorizing every detail, every line and curve. And then, as the sun was setting and the room was filled with the golden light of evening, Olivia took one last breath and was gone. The grief was overwhelming. Ryder felt like a part of himself had been ripped away, leaving a hole that could never be filled. But he had his family around him, and they supported each other through the dark days that followed. They buried Olivia in the cemetery where her father had been laid to rest nearly 30 years before, and Reverend Matthews, now quite elderly but still serving the community, said beautiful words over her grave. In the months that followed, Ryder struggled. The house felt empty without Olivia's presence, and he missed her with an ache that never fully went away. But he kept his promise to her. He kept living, kept finding joy in his children and grandchildren. Robert and Sarah gave him another grandchild, a little girl named Olivia in honor of her grandmother. Rose married a kind young man named Daniel, and they had a son. Thomas met and married a spirited woman named Catherine, and they started their own family. Ryder watched his family grow and flourish, and he took comfort in knowing that Olivia's legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren. He spent his days helping with the grandchildren, offering advice to his sons about the business, and spending quiet time remembering the woman he had loved more than life itself. He often walked out to the cemetery to visit Olivia's grave, sitting beside it and talking to her as if she were still there. He told her about the children and grandchildren, about the changes in Wickenburg and the territory. He told her how much he missed her, how much he still loved her. In February of 1912, Arizona finally achieved statehood, becoming the 48th state in the Union. It was a momentous occasion, celebrated throughout the new state. Ryder attended the celebrations in Wickenburg with his family, and he wished Olivia could have been there to see it. She had lived in Arizona territory her entire adult life, had helped build this community. She should have been there to see it become a state. As Ryder grew older, his health began to decline. He developed arthritis that made it hard to ride and work like he used to. His hearing began to fail, and his eyesight was not what it had been. But his mind stayed sharp, and he remained active in his family's lives, attending every important event and offering wisdom and support whenever it was needed. In the spring of 1920, Ryder celebrated his 64th birthday surrounded by his children, grandchildren, and even a couple of great-grandchildren. It was a joyous occasion, with a big dinner and cake and lots of laughter. But as Ryder looked around at all the faces gathered in his honor, he felt a deep longing for Olivia. He had lived nearly 9 years without her, and while he had found happiness and purpose in that time, there was always a part of him that felt incomplete without her. That summer, Ryder's health took a turn for the worse. He developed pneumonia, and despite Doc Garrett's best efforts and the attentive care of his children, he did not recover. On a warm evening in late August, with all his family gathered around him just as they had been for Olivia, Ryder Kane passed away peacefully in his sleep. They buried him next to Olivia, their graves side by side under the Arizona sky. At the funeral, Robert spoke about his father, about the kind of man he had been. "My father was a man of integrity and compassion," he said. "He believed in helping others and doing what was right even when it was hard. He saved my mother's life when they first met, and he spent the rest of his life showing her and all of us what true love looked like. He built a business and a legacy, but more importantly, he built a family founded on love and respect. We will miss him terribly, but we will honor his memory by living the way he taught us to live." And they did. The Kane family continued to thrive in Arizona, running the freight business for several more generations before eventually selling it and moving into other ventures. But they never forgot their roots, never forgot the story of how Ryder Kane had found Olivia Owens stranded in the desert, had given her water and a reason to keep going, and how that simple act of compassion had blossomed into a great love story that shaped the lives of all who came after. The house where Ryder and Olivia had lived was eventually turned into a historical landmark, preserved as an example of life in territorial Arizona. And in the cemetery in Wickenburg, their graves remained side by side, a testament to a love that had endured hardship and tragedy, that had grown and deepened over the years, and that had left a lasting impact on everyone who knew them. Their story became part of the local lore, passed down through generations. People would speak of the freight hauler who had found a dying woman in the desert and had fallen in love with her, of the partnership they had built together, of the family they had raised. It was a reminder that even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the Old West, love could flourish, could transform lives, could create something beautiful and lasting. And so the legacy of Ryder Kane and Olivia Owens lived on, a story of hope and redemption, of love found in the most unlikely of places, of two souls who had saved each other and built a life together that neither could have imagined when they first met on that scorching day in the Arizona desert. Their love story became a beacon for others, proof that even in the darkest moments when all seems lost, there is always hope, always the possibility of finding something worth living for, worth fighting for, worth loving with all your heart.